improvement because of the having come out of the financial crisis of the late 90s. So debt to GDP was running at about little over 100% of
Yep.
debt to GDP. We were and trending downwards. The economy was growing. Poverty levels were down.
Somewhere about
Uh,
9%.
yes, and we were basically making progress. Now, truthfully, there was a major global crisis
Mm-hmm.
in 2008,
That
and
time the GLP was in power.
the JLP was in power.
Right.
And well, in the first instance, they didn't respond to it quickly. You might remember there was a point when the then Minister of Finance said that the crisis was going to be good for
Yes, it would
Jamaica.
benefit Jamaica. It wouldn't hurt us.
Yeah, so there was that kind of misconception. We'll put it that way.
Right.
That was there. It that proved to be a foolhardy expectation,
Mhm.
and quickly the government was compelled, in effect, to go to the International Monetary Fund and secure some support, which they
Right.
did. But the problem was that they didn't meet the requirements. They never met the targets. There was one test that was successfully completed, and then there was no more on which the fund was prepared to pronounce that they had successfully completed
Mhm.
the test.
So they
There
took one
was
IMF test and couldn't take any more.
I don't want to make a well, they didn't put it
Right.
that way. They didn't meet the targets for the um didn't meet their targets for net international reserves. The primary surplus targets, the budgetary targets were not met by the government. There were purchases that were made, for example, of buses without the approval, or in fact contrary to the agreements with the fund. And so the program went off stream.
Right.
By there was no more money coming um, after uh, early 2011, right? It was a 2010 program that
Right.
was signed in the autumn of 2010, I believe. Going just straight from memory, and it was off the rails
So as you
by
said,
2011. And so when we came in, there was a bare cupboard, in effect,
nothing.
and there was a bare cupboard.
And nobody would
Um,
talk to you.
well, they spoke, but what they were saying was not comforting. They were not willing to come to agreements. We had a review done. We found out, we identified the targets that had been missed, and it took a very long time, as I said, because and the history is replete ultimately with what the reality was.
Mhm.
We spent time in negotiations. We were willing to do the heavy lifting, but there was a strong body of opinion that basically said you cannot trust the Jamaican authorities. And
Because people,
despite
what,
our efforts,
one
despite
thing people need to understand, Dr. Phillips, is that whether GLP or PNP, it is Jamaica.
It
that the
is
IMF
Jamaica.
deals with.
And when Jamaica develops a bad reputation with the international community, the entire population, not just the political leadership, but the population
Suffers.
suffers
Mhm.
in that situation. It took a lot of diplomatic effort in which the Prime Minister got engaged, in which I myself got engaged. We had to try to mobilize influence with the people in Congress and the Black Caucus in the US Congress,
Mhm.
and more widely afield in the administration of that period, the Obama administration, and others, to make the point that, look, Jamaica is going to crash and we can't do anything more. So, you know, because of the influence of the PNP and Comrade Simpson Miller and the PNP generally, there was a visit from a delegation of the US Congress, led
Okay.
by Congresswoman Maxine Waters,
Mhm.
who visited the IMF uh, on Christmas Eve in 2012, because we had been in discussions with people supportive of Jamaica to explain that we were prepared to do all the difficult tasks and
Yeah,
that
we
we
did.
would do it,
Mhm. Mhm.
because and that we were not the previous administration, and that we and that any differences of view that we had with the IMF about the things that they were requiring were not because of an unwillingness to do difficult things, but because those things were impossible to do and would have a catastrophic impact on the Jamaican economy. So after, I think they were able to persuade the managing director of the fund, who at the time was Christine Lagarde,
Mhm.
about the seriousness of purpose that we had, and that we proceeded then to get a program which was approved in May of 2013, and we proceeded with that program. And one of your question was what area of satisfaction. I was satisfied that we had met, by the time the government demitted office, we had met every single obligation that we had signed to under the program, and in effect had rescued Jamaica's reputation, Jamaica's name. It was a difficult program, but it's an important thing for us to understand as a
Yes.
country, because
Dr. Phillips, just a minute. Styles FM, we're taking a break on Styles FM and on Caribbean Radio. We are continuing here on Portland Spice TV. So, Styles FM, when you come back from the break, you just join us. Caribbean Radio, you do the same thing. You're listening to the former Minister of Finance and the former opposition leader, still member of Parliament, Dr. Peter David Phillips, one of the persons who really rescued Jamaica, because as he said earlier, when the PNP came into office in 2011, or was it 2012? 2011, I think,
well, we
late
won the election 2011. The
December.
government was sworn in 2012 in the
Right.
January. Yeah.
Jamaica was on its face. The international market would not talk to us. We were locked out. We couldn't get no money from the IMF. All the multilaterals, IMF, IDB, the G7
European
countries
Union, absolutely, all of them.
wouldn't lend us any money. But before we go deep into it, Dr. Phillips, how do you feel now when you hear people on the political platform saying that they are the ones who rescued Jamaica in 2016?
Well, you know, I recognize that, well, there was no rescue. And they know that. There are other occasions they have spoken differently. They are the
Well,
same
I'll
ones.
tell you something, Dr. Phillips. I don't know if you heard the Prime Minister this evening. He
No.
did give you credit this evening, finally.
Well, and he has done it before on different occasions. But, you know, I really want to say not about, it's not about, we never did this, as I'm saying, never do it for the likes. Did it for the love of country
Yes.
and because it had to be done. Right? No. The fact of the matter is that if you ask me about the things I appreciated about time in political life, and I mentioned one, there are others,
Yes.
but we
Yes.
don't. But we don't have to focus now on that. But if you ask me about the negatives, one of the negatives I think is that our political culture is too tribalistic. It has tended more to divide us as a people, to misrepresent the history of our struggles, and therefore to prevent us from understanding some of the real challenges that we will have to deal with as a people. Remember, there used to be a refrain that when we were, so to speak, meeting the targets that we had signed Jamaica to, there was a guy that said, there was the former Minister of Finance said that we are only passing the IMF test, but we're not passing the people's test, as
I
if to
remember that.
suggest that there was an alternative for a bankrupt country.
And he was the one who didn't pass the IMF test that brought us on our face.
And because one thing, just like when you become an adult, and as a young man growing up, you face it, I face it, our children face it, and everybody. There comes a point when well, look here, the first responsibility of adulthood is the ability to manage your own finances. If you can't manage your own finances, everybody takes step with you. Bank will come seize your house. Um, Companies will come and take away your TV from your neighbors, take away your bed out of your house
Take away your
because you're
car.
not managing your finances.
Yes.
As it is for the individual, so it is for a country. The first responsibility of independence ultimately is that you have to be able to manage your finances. It is true that there's a lot of injustice in the world. It is true for the individual and it is true for the country. The world is very unequal. Many of small countries get battered by the man. We have to struggle to change those global structures, those international structures, while at the same time we can't be irresponsible about how we manage our affairs, precisely because we are small and don't have a whole lot of power in the world community of nations. Just like the individual who's a boy, if I had access to better schooling, or that my parents
I'm
had
going to get a
some
start.
money or little things to give me, could have given me a better start. life would have different. That may be so, but it can't justify teething people things. It
Mhm.
can't justify borrowing and not repaying.
Paying.
It can justify all those things. You have to try and see how you can manage to organize your business, become more enterprising, go study harder, get a better job, whatever it is, so that you can step up. It is the responsibility of governments to have create this space so people can step up more easily
Yes.
in life,
Let me
by
just
creating the
let me just
conditions.
welcome back those listeners on Styles FM and on Caribbean Radio HD over there in New York and Florida. Welcome back to the Colin Bell Show. We're talking to former Minister of Finance, Dr. Peter D. Phillips. And one of the reasons why we're talking to him this evening is really to set the record straight about 2012 to 2016, an era that the present administration don't speak about. They don't speak about 2007 to 2011 either, because those are the times when the GLP crashed the economy, the PNP rescued Jamaica. As Dr. Peter Phillips said, the country was flat on its face when they came in power. Dr. Phillips, you had to put a number of things into place so as to ensure that Jamaica never get to that place again. Tell us about some of those things that you put in place.
Well, I think the first thing was to recover our reputation and to meet our obligations. And there was the programs included a lot of efforts at tax reform, and customs reform and things like that. But more importantly, and again in keeping with a long tradition within the PNP, we embarked upon what I call an exercise in the politics of participation. We set up what was called epoch, hmm, Economic Program Oversight Committee. And we basically said to the other stakeholders, the bankers and the PSOJ, the trade unions and civil society, we because that we were prepared to open the books, to be absolutely transparent about the decisions that we were taking, and that they could appoint a chairman that would sit jointly with the chairman on the government side, which was the governor of the Bank of Jamaica, and that they were free to talk publicly and go and explain to the public if we were being irresponsible about any aspect of the program. And that epoch model is a model that many other countries in the Caribbean and across the world have in fact embarked upon, and have helped us make our and has helped buy credibility for the government at that time. Um, and I think that it is the real test of how we never get to that point again is going to be found really in the challenge that still remains, and I dare say one which was we were further ahead in managing when we demitted office in 20 2016, and that is the question of growth, economic growth, because quite frankly, we needed to have a we needed to have a Jamaica can only breathe easily as far as our economic future is concerned if we are going to get greater levels of economic growth. Over the past 8 quarters, 2 years, we have not had any growth in the economy. Even before the government, likes to make a lot about the pandemic, and the pandemic did have a negative effect on the economy, no
Mhm.
doubt about it.
All right, Dr.
But
Phillips, let me just stop you there a bit because we lost everything a while ago. We had a power outage. So
oh,
we lost a lot of what you were saying. But we are back now. Hope we are back on Styles and on
and
Caribbean Radio.
I can't stay with you too long, But
That's
I
all right,
want to
Dr.
say
Phillips.
something. I
But
want to
just,
say something.
yeah, go ahead.
I was saying, I made the point about epoch,
Right, yes, that's where we lost you.
and that the epoch model has been extended to many countries by the IMF, and many across the Caribbean. And it is an area in which we in Jamaica should feel proud, because it was a homegrown Jamaican institution. You know.
Yes.
No, the second point I was making is that we can't really, as a country, take any comfort in our condition, despite what we have managed to do in reducing our level of debt. We can't take comfort unless we are able to master the challenge of economic growth.
Growth,
Because
growth.
it is only by mastering and securing greater levels of economic growth that we will be able to offer people the higher incomes, the higher quality of life, the better schooling, the better health systems, and the like. That is the whole purpose
Mhm.
of our existence as a country. And the experience in recent years has not been good.
Mhm.
And I dare say the experience over a long period of time has not been good. And I don't find any, while we can, while I understand people getting on the political platform, I've done it myself, and making the claim that I did better than you,
Mhm.
and you never did what I did. I think that we should collectively accept that there are some challenges that we need not to quarrel about, but to collaborate in trying to meet the objectives. It made no sense when the JLP in 2016 gave the impression that they would be able to give away resources without recovering it
Mhm.
in taxation.
Right.
It, thankfully, the IMF told them the time of day, and they did meet that obligation. But it shouldn't take some people from outside to teach us as a country the basic responsibilities of running a sound economy. And also, given the given the experience that we had set up in the period of before we came, before the government changed, we had set up a growth agenda secretariat to marshal all the government's efforts in relation to growth and undertake the things that needed to be challenged in order to deal with it. The government, the new government came in, swept this all aside. They have not secured any growth. Remember, they were talking at a point in time about 5 in 4.
And
Uh,
that's the question I want to ask you, Dr. Phillips. What is it that we need to do as a country now so as to grow this economy?
well, there are some critical areas that will require the mobilization of the whole society. Energy and energy costs. You
Yes.
cannot, there has been a steady increase in the cost of energy over the past 8 years.
It is almost said that we have the highest energy cost in the world right now.
And well, I am I don't have the evidence to say that, but I know that they have more than doubled in from what they were in 2016. You
Right.
can't have a serious manufacturing sector that is going to be globally competitive in the circumstance where you have those kinds of costs. It is something around which you can, I believe, the problem can be solved because there are lots of renewable energy sources, wind and solar, that we can utilize. It's going to require some legislative changes as well, around the distribution system of energy, and we need to ensure that this is an area where we can collaborate and not spend 1,000 years, in 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 wasteful political one-upmanship before we come together and deal with that particular aspect of the problem. A second aspect of the problem that we will have to deal with is the whole question of government efficiency.
Mhm.
This is a thing that we have been dealing with for a very long time, going all the way back. Oh, we have had administrative reform programs going back into the 1980s in the same Golding administration, Bruce Golding
Yeah.
administration. Peter Moses headed a committee that was to look at the question of administrative reform. But you still have the problem today where it takes too long to get building approvals. It takes too long to get your export permits if you are an agriculturalist. It takes too long to get procurement decisions. We even hear government ministers
Begging
complaining about the length of time that
for
it takes to
procurement.
secure procurement. These procurement rules are not things that are made like Moses' tablets that came down from heaven when he went up the mountain.
It's
These are
remake
things
them.
that we can change.
Yes. Yes.
We, the people of Jamaica, the governments of Jamaica, we need to do it rather than hand wringing and blaming it like it's something ordained in heaven. We have to tackle the question of the whole public sector reform. What was to have been a major public sector reform program became just a pay increase program that
And
was
still not
done
yet
by the
completed.
former Minister of Finance. And we don't really have a more significant thing. Now we have to also develop a clear-cut plan for some specific sectors that we think can be drivers. That's the direction in which the world is moving now. In the
Yes.
US and China, among other countries, Koreas, they have moved into making semiconductor chips and others because that's the future. We are not at that stage of development, but we can look at our sectors like agriculture, which is crying out
Yes.
for a clear-cut plan over the past 8 years again, we have had a steady increase in the amount of food imports, and we are further away from feeding ourselves economically than we were in 2015 and 2016.
You don't have a lot of time, Dr. Davis, and I
Yeah,
have four
so
questions.
yeah.
Four more questions that I want to ask you.
Mm.
You were you were a minister of health. Assess our health sector now, Dr. Davis. How do you grade our health sector now?
Well, I think that again there is need for better management of the health sector. I think that we need to make some progress along the basic challenge that we have and we're going to have is that we need some form of national health insurance for because unless the hospitals are able to charge for the cost of the service that they deliver, they will deliver bad service. But we have to accept that there are people who cannot afford to pay. We have done this free health care, but we have called it free health care, but you can't get it because when you go to the hospital, there is no care. So it's going to require a national health insurance scheme of some sort. There have been studies done. When I was Minister of Health, we did a study building on a previous one that had been done as far back as Ken Ball. Again, we need to not play politics with these matters, but we need to come up with a national platform as to how we're going to tackle it. And in stages, it can be tackled all at once. But there are some things we don't need to play politics with. So, the next question.
You were also Minister of Transportation. You brought back sanity to Jamaica transportation system by bringing back the JUTC. Looking at the JUTC now, it's a shadow of what it used to be. What do you think we need to do to get it back to a stage where, because we see the traffic congestion in Kingston, it's
Again, the
crazy.
problem, the problem with the JUTC has been twofold, as I can see it, as far as the corporate area is concerned. The first thing is that the government, because of putting politics first, has not been willing to recover the costs when they have had to. No? And it's the same thing that they did to the taxi operators. As the price of tires going up, the price of gas going up, the price of everything was going up, but they're not bringing any efficiencies to operate, and they're not going to raise any fares because of the political difficulties, and therefore the end result was that, as you see it now, you're going to have to take people, anybody who is proposing to govern has to be willing to have honest dialogue with the country about the challenges which exist. And the second part of the crisis of the JUTC was that they at the same time while the JUTC was running down, they put an unlimited number of vehicles, taxi operators on the
Yes,
road.
to compete with the JUTC.
Exactly.
You were also Minister of National Security, Dr. Phillips. Our murder rate is one that is most uncomfortable. What are your suggestions to this present government as it relates to murders in Jamaica, homicides?
Well, I think that there are some elements that I would recommend to them to reconsider. I am pleased that from what I can observe from my distance, that there seems to be a greater willingness to build an, an intelligence led policing strategy, but which means that you have to spend a lot of effort on the gathering of that intelligence so that it can become actionable intelligence and you identify the people who are doing things. For example, there were a lot of gun imports taking place in the country. It's not 100,000 people importing guns. It's a smaller number. This is a task that for intelligence gathering, just to name one, and for skillful effort in that regard, that when you identify things, you wait until you can catch the people involved rather than just capture the guns here and there.
And you don't catch the perpetrator.
They, I believe also that we have to recognize that it is essential to twin your hard policing effort with an effort to win hearts and minds in the communities. You have a lot of people who venture into a life of crime, really because they don't see the alternatives, or because crime is pain,
Mhm.
eh? and and that requires going in. They have done some work with the Zozos, etc. But I think that programs like the Peace Management Initiative and the Citizen Security and Justice Program, and so are models that are worthwhile revisiting and pursuing as they do it, and that you have to be able to understand. And I think it is, but there needs to be much more outreach to the public to
Mhm.
explain. Again, this is probably a big area of difference. I believe that a public that is communicated with, that
Yes.
understands the nature of the challenges, is much more willing to deal with you,
Mhm.
and to understand. A lot of time was wasted on this. Again, what seems to me to be a kind of politically motivated pursuit of states of emergency. We have had a downward movement in more recent times in relation with some of the murder stats.
Yes.
Needs to go down further, but
They say we are down 20% this year.
it hasn't been the result of states of emergency. So
No,
a
not
lot
at
of
all.
time was wasted unnecessarily and
Yes.
without allowing the police to revisit bases. The final thing I'd say there is to strengthen and enhance reform efforts within the security forces, and to and to and to ensure that you have a trustworthy in the sense that every citizen, no matter whether they are, no matter their political persuasion, will trust to carry information to the security forces. You can't win that problem unless the people are confident in the security forces.
Final question, Dr. Phillips. I just want to ask Styles and Caribbean Radio, not to take the break yet. Let me just ask Dr. Phillips the final question so Dr. Phillips can get to go. Then we take the break. Dr. Phillips, you have been in politics for over 30 years, public life. You have been ministers in several ministry. You have been opposition leader. You have been finance minister. We have never heard any hint of corruption is one man name they have never been able to call. Dr. Phillips, the Prime Minister of Jamaica, his statutory filing has not been certified for 2, maybe 3 consecutive years, and there are lots of issues. How do you assess the whole IC report, the position that our Prime Minister is in right now?
I would just say this, that's a matter that I am going to leave for the Integrity Commission and the Prime Minister to deal with. There is a judgment. The matter has been taken to court. There is a judgment to come forward. I think it needs to, his specific matter needs to rest there. But I am fortunate. This year marks the 100th anniversary of the birth of Michael Manley.
Joshua Manley, yes.
And I was fortunate in my political infancy, so to speak, to have worked with Comrade Manley. And in his office, that was my first assignment as minister in his office. Working with him, I became general secretary under his stewardship. And I learned one important lesson is that if the people don't have trust in your integrity, then you are going to be unable to secure their confidence, particularly when there are difficult decisions that you will have to confront and they will have to confront with you. So integrity should be the outcome of a kind of moral commitment that you have. But beyond that, it is also an essential part of your capacity to govern. It's an essential part of governance. And any political leader that doesn't understand that is committing political suicide.
Dr. Phillips, it has been a pleasure talking to you this evening. I want to say thanks for making the time. If there's anything you want to add, anything you want to say to the listeners.
It's been a pleasure. I hope I've been able to enlighten even one person. But
I am sure you have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. It's a pleasure. Thanks for your service and all the best.
All right. Thank you. God
Blessings. Bless. Dr. Peter David Phillips, Styles FM. We take the break. Caribbean Radio. We take a break. Jack, are you there? Well, it looks like Styles not ready to take the break yet. So.
This is Styles FM. It is back.
That was Dr. Peter David Phillips, the Gleaner Man of the Year for 2015. Served as Minister of Health, Minister of National Security, Minister of Transportation and Works, Minister of Finance. And I dare say that every minister, every ministry that this man has gone to, he has performed admirably. So I just want to say to the people in the chat room, make we not pay no mind to bad rubbish. Yeah? Because if you realize 99% of the people in the chat room are very, very, very intelligent people, paying attention, listening to Dr. Phillips, understanding where we are as a country, but then you have 1% Abuto who comes into the chat room and try their best to divert what we are doing. When we come back, we're going... Yeah, man, when Styles come back on Caribbean Radio from the break, we are going to be opening the phone lines, taking your calls, and we're going to chat about anything you want to chat about. Anything you want to chat about. Want to remind you that the program on Styles is a paid program. We pay for the program on Styles FM. Yeah, man. And of course, if you want to sponsor the program, you can touch base with us by assisting us in paying for the program. Yeah, man? Mm-hmm. All right.
Body mountain.
Oh, so Style still upon them break. But us are going truckle till Styles family return. Yeah, man. So we saw the PNP conference last week Sunday and the GLP conference this week Sunday. And the man
we are going to break away from Colin Bell show. I just piggyback on his system because I wanted to hear what Dr. Peter David Phillips was saying. And I just want to break away from this and tell you all thanks for coming onto the program to listening to what is going on. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you all for coming on. I must commend Colin Bell for his effort to bring on Dr. Peter David Phillips, that we all can listen to what he was saying. Thank you all very much. Have a great night, everyone. Remember to join Wilfred Rattigan tomorrow night with Come Reason with Rattigan on his Wednesday night program, where he's going to dig deeper in what the Prime Minister said this afternoon when he addressed the nation. So join Mr. Rattigan tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. and he will dig deeper in it. But join me tomorrow morning for, I think they're going to have Jamaica House press conference. I need to figure that out. And also for a presentation from me tomorrow. We're going to dig deeper in what is going on in the tourism sector. I'm trying to get a hold of Mr. Granville Valentine to come on tomorrow, but we'll figure how that will work. Thank you all very much for coming on. Have a great night, everybody. Good night. Have a great night. May God bless you. May God bless our island home, Jamaica land we love. It is a wonderful night. Have a good night, everyone.
When the game gets rough and this life just seems so tough, make we talk, my people, make we talk. When this town becomes an ugly place, don't let it erase the smile from your face. Make we talk, people, make we talk. Conversation is the key, a guiding light for you and me. Spark a talk and you will see. Conflict solver A to Z. World leaders master the art of self-defense just by talk. So people, make we talk. Hey, we're living in a world that on ourselves we must depend. Make we talk.